Section 4 objective is to describe the types of bulk facility storage tanks and their associated hazards. Bulk facility storage tanks come in many varieties depending on the types of materials that will be stored and the pressures at which they need to be maintained. Pressure tanks, also called pressure containers or pressure vessels, are designed to hold contents under pressure. Pressure tanks have pressure of 15 psi or greater. Examples of pressure containers include horizontal pressure vessels and spherical pressure vessels. These tanks typically release their products as gases and vapors during rapid relief events, slow leaks from valves and fittings, or violent ruptures. Pressure tanks may contain a variety of flammable, toxic, and/or corrosive gases. Pressure tanks are especially dangerous when subjected to heating or fire because they can levy. Contents leaking from these containers may expand rapidly and displace oxygen, especially in confined spaces. Flammable gases may travel far distances where they can ignite if exposed to an ignition source. Toxic gases may travel far distances and affect people and animals well away from the incident at scene. Cryogenic liquid storage tanks may have pressures of 15 psi or greater, with capacities from 300 to 400,000 gallons. They are insulated, vacuum jacketed tanks with safety relief valves and rupture disc. These tanks may contain cryogenic carbon dioxide, liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen, or other materials. A note that some new liquid natural gas tanks have a capacity of 30 to 60 million gallons. Materials released from bulk cryogenic liquid tanks will be very cold and therefore will tend to pool close to the ground. Typically, they will initially be visible as a fog or cloud. Some types of cryogenic leaks will displace oxygen. Some will create an explosive environment. A warning to remember is a lack of visible indication does not mean that the hazard is dissipated. And if oxygen cryogenic, which is LOX, leaks on asphalt, it will make the asphalt shock sensitive. Low pressure storage tanks have operating pressures from 0.5 to 15 psi. Types of low pressure storage tanks include dome roofs, spheroid tanks, and noted spheroid tanks. Low pressure storage tanks typically contain flammable and combustible liquids with low vapor pressures, such as solvents. Flammability and/or toxicity are often hazards associated with the products stored in these containers. Low pressure tanks can release their products as liquid or as gas and vapors depending on the product contained. The priority is eliminating ignition sources at incidents involving these containers. Non-pressure atmospheric storage tanks are designed to hold contents under little or no pressure. The maximum pressure under which an atmospheric tank is capable of holding its contents is 0.5 psi. Common types of atmospheric tanks include horizontal tanks, ordinary cone roof tanks, open and closed roof floating roof tanks, lifter roof tanks, and vapor dome roof tanks. Non-pressure atmospheric storage tanks typically hold liquids, most often hydrocarbons. This liquid may be flammable, combustible products such as fuel, oil, or other petroleum products, or corrosive and/or toxic such as sulfuric acid and aniline. Damaged non-pressure atmospheric storage tanks release their contents via spilling or leaking through container walls, valves, fittings, and attachments. Depending on the product, vapors, which are often heavier than air, may travel some distances from their liquid source. Treat interiors of bulk pressure atmospheric storage tanks as confined spaces. Even when empty, these containers are likely to have dangerous atmospheres. Follow special procedures when operating in and around them. Underground storage tanks are typically constructed of steel, fiberglass, or steel with a fiber coating. Other features of underground storage tanks include that they usually contain liquids, typically gasoline. Some horizontal propane pressure tanks have been buried underground. Classified as low pressure or non-pressure atmospheric, more than 10% of their surface area is underground, and they can be buried under or adjacent to a building or driveway. Underground tanks have fill and vent connections located nearby. Vents, fill ports, and occupancy type gas service stations, private garages, and fleet maintenance stations provide visual clues to the presence of underground tanks. Many commercial and private underground tanks have been abandoned, some with products still in them. Leaking underground storage tanks may go undetected until they leak into an undesirable location in liquid or vapor form. Fires and/or explosions can occur if flammable materials contact an ignition source. The review question for this section is list the types of bulk facility storage tanks and the hazard that they may present to first responders. To find this answer, see pages 234 through 240 of the manual for the answers.